our pronouns are on. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yes.
Awesome.
Look
Thank you.
at that.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Very cool. So as soon as everybody else gets here, we'll get started.
I know.
It's
We
7
need
now.
a little factor in the bathroom.
Oh, it is 7.
Who uses for concern? I just want to make sure.
Sue and Kate.
Typically, I can. I know.
Started. This meeting is called to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. We typically start with our opportunity for public comment. Tonight we have no one who has requested to speak, so we will move right into the report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I move we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022.
I'll second. Jen.
Jen, thank you. You're missing a folder? Do you have a folder for Sue?
See?
A folder for Sue?
Sorry. Sleep at the wheel.
Thank you.
That's okay. Did anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes?
There was one part that was a little bit confusing to read through.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see, I looked at it online, so it'll take me a second to
Yep.
figure out what it was here. I think it came in number 5.
Right. This was the masking discussion.
Yeah, there was one sentence that wasn't very clear to me, but.
Third line.
Yeah.
To the third line, Sue.
Yeah, I think so.
I have one on page 2, number 5,
Yeah.
fourth line down.
That's what we're talking about.
Some bit of security that is going to be lost for some people and may be uncomfortable, I
Yes.
think is what the sum is supposed to be, may.
Yes.
Even the third line, too.
Yeah.
This reads strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Noting some of our students with can be, I don't know what that's supposed to say.
I think really what we're saying is now it can be a challenge that the masks have been
Oh.
removed.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the intent for sure.
Can we just take out that sentence that starts at some of the feedback and ends in uncomfortable?
I don't, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that whole thing can just, it's redundant.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was,
There
it just
is-
was kind of
It goes on to
Awkward.
state it again. People are in different places.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So just remove the second sentence would solve
it
the,
starts at some and
confusion.
ends at
Sure.
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
gotcha. Okay, that's a
Just,
good idea.
Felt like
Yeah.
it was too much there.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? I see 5 hands, I see 6 hands, thank you, 6-0, thank you. Very good, that brings us to the report of the chair. First item on my list, we did have a town officials, or town official, I guess, in the singular, since we only met with South Berwick this time, on March 9th. Jen, you were there, if you wanted to give a summary?
Sure. Yep, so Mr. Pellerin from South Berwick was there, and this was the first day that the schools were mask optional, so there was just a check-in, just to note that. Also, Mr. Cavalier told him that the budget was presented to the board the prior week, and that a lot of our costs were increased by the increase in fuel prices and electricity prices. Mr. Pellerin noted the same struggles for the town with their budget relating to especially diesel costs. And we do share a diesel contract, and we're still waiting to lock in pricing, so there was just some brief discussion about touching base with that, but that the bids were out. Mr. Pellerin was going to tour the schools. Did that happen yesterday?
Yesterday, yes.
Okay. And with some of the folks from the town office. And also, Mr. Pellerin had reached out to Representative Tiffany Roberts, just to sort of encourage her to lend voice to the rising CMP costs for especially the elderly people in town, and the effects that those rising costs were having, and just wanted to connect with her to be sure that there was a voice for that from town. Also, Mr. Caverly noted that Michelle Meyer had planned to connect with the DOT about the light in front of the high school, that ongoing discussion. We just reviewed briefly the crossing guard position out at Central. And then some of the motion lights outside Central. There's efforts being made to find a more cost-effective alternative because there's been some glitchiness with the lights. So they're working with the vendor to try to find a cost-effective solution, and maybe alternative when they go to fix those problems. And then South Berwick is hiring for a new police chief, and that's pretty much all I have. Is that it?
That was everything I had in my notes.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, second thing, highlights of the board workshop, which we just conducted. Let me just speak for a little bit, and then I'll ask anybody on the board who wants to add. Ryan started out by giving us a really nice summary of the state funding, the EPS formula, how that all works, and what that looks like for this year. Talked about the local contributions, specifically the impact of both the number of students per town and the mill rate per town. So, well, not the mill rate per town, but the impact of the mill rate on each of the towns based on their tax base. That was very helpful, thank you, Ryan. And then we went through the individual budgets for the high school, the middle school, the athletic, technology, and maintenance as well. Some really interesting philosophical discussions around the intent in the spending being to get more kids involved in more things, which was really awesome. That was good to hear. That's pretty much what I have to say about that. Anybody have anything to add? Good exercise. We're going to continue that for 2 more workshops to get through all of the rest of the portions of the budget, and then we'll get to the meetings at the end.
Again, I just want to reiterate, I just so appreciate the thoughtfulness and the proactive, advanced planning approach to the long-term thinking about
Yes.
our budget, longer term, and
Yeah.
not just looking at next year, but really looking at the future and how it all plays out over time, thinking
I
ahead.
suppose I should have mentioned, Mr. Creech in particular gave us a presentation of how he plans to implement changes to the budgeting approach at the middle school. by involving all of the staff, keeping track of expenditures over the course of the year, and that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I really appreciated the fact of how we're trying to make the mission statement in our strategic plan
Yes.
part of
Let's
what we do.
focus on aligning
You know,
the
and
budget
that's
with
really
that,
important.
yeah.
So-
It's just great
Absolutely.
because you reflect that so well when you do the overarching in terms of aligning everything to those goals. And so to see that at the school level will be interesting as well.
Okay, that concludes my report and brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much. First, just two tough ones. Kathy Bousquet, who has been a longtime teacher in the district, impacted hundreds and hundreds of students' lives, notified me about 3 weeks ago now that her intent to retire at the end of the year. A huge loss, and that will create some huge, not only just the impact on students, but the institutional knowledge and just the positive and the impact on kids that she's had over her career. So we're just so thankful for what she's done, both at the Central School and also at now the Marcia Gray Works School. And then Friday was another toughie, to lose a bus driver, to see, Vicki shared with me that on Facebook, we had more comments about losing a bus driver than we have had like in 5 years.
Wow.
Jim King is just a great person, but also someone who's invested in the community. He's also the person that if he was driving a bus might be on the sidelines cheering kids on, or he might be, throwing batting practice as kids are getting ready to play. I mean, he just really tried to immerse himself, to see him, engaging kids, as soon as, last Thursday of just, I'm going to miss you today, I'm sorry, just this ability to be able to connect with children. Not only to mention the fact of just losing, a key member of our transportation department. So difficult. We had the transportation department had a little going away party for him, and they did kind of a last run kind of celebration at a few of the schools. So he was very touched. COVID update. This is a little bit different than the last 2-year COVID update. So we talked a lot going back into January before things changed. I guess I was going to say a different way, which I'm glad they didn't. That things changed and numbers really spiked. And so we talked about how do we have that path back to some sense of normalcy for kids. And so it kind of for us, it started with that January 28th date saying, you know what, that's the date where we're going to have masking optional outside for all of our schools. Let's be really clear about that. And taking that step. Over the next month, how do we start to change how the lunchrooms work? How does that, and that really kind of came to really a focal point when we had the opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but the food service committee kind of did some tours and really to kind of see from a food standpoint the impact of these safety protocols that we have in place. And obviously the safety protocols are extremely important, but there's the social emotional impact on kids of having those protocols. There's also kind of the nutritional and some other side effects that happen over the course of that. So we've done a great deal of planning, and I am happy to tell you that at this point in time, every building has moved back into their cafeterias in one shape or another. Some is much easier than others, like the Marshall Great Works School. That was a really, that was probably a little bit more of a seamless part because obviously the number of students they have, the space that they have, there's some variables that are in there. Doing that, we also want to be mindful that we do have this really kind of difficult place that we're in with these students or staff that come back after being COVID positive on days 6 through 10, and it's so counterintuitive. We never want kids to feel isolated.
Right.
And balancing that, and how do we do that, but at the same time, also have to be mindful of all the needs. So we're really trying to be finding a mindful way to do that. So we had a wonderful conversation last Thursday, I believe, with the high school. Included the food service department in there. We did a walkthrough. We talked to some students. We kind of said, look, how many days do you need to get this up and running appropriately? And so what does that mean? Having both the servery open and the lines open, having, 7 or 8 options for students, like what does this look like? And, I think they would have pushed for Tuesday. We pushed for Monday, and and the question was why? This is why we have these conversations. And from a food service perspective, you see the food part of it. And Rob and I, when we were meeting with, the group, the bigger issue for us is it's going to take our custodians time to set up. We can't set up the cafeteria on Sunday to see if it works, then break it back down, and then go back to what we did on Friday, on Monday, and then go back on Tuesday. So we came to a conclusion that we would do it on Monday. We have kind of created some social distancing frameworks for people. We're not going to try to police that. There isn't necessarily any more social distancing guidelines in the SOP, but we did want to be mindful that if people want to be spaced out, here's some marks that you'd be able to see, and we're using those as some guidelines. The middle school poses a little bit different situation, and so when we made the move at Marshall Middle School, we have 180 approximately desks in the cafeteria. And so in a perfect world, it would be easy to say, look, put the cafeteria tables back out, we're back in business, there's nothing to worry about. The reality is where the heck are we gonna put 180 desks that we have right now in the midst of a pandemic? And so that's gonna take some time for us. And so we're gonna stick with the desk model until April vacation. That's gonna give our custodians an opportunity to go in and get the tables out of storage. They're gonna have to take apart some desks. There's some things that they're gonna have to do, and so we're trying to minimize the impact on our custodians. At the same time, we're going to be putting a large number of desks soon back into classrooms because we're going to be going back to kind of that normal classroom setting, which is going to have upwards of 25 to 26 desks. Right now we have maybe 18 or 19, depending on the classroom that you're in. Obviously, it could be more, could be less. And so just trying to find, like, commonsensically, like, how do we make this work? And so we have all of the students there. They're 3 feet apart. They're in desks still. Not ideal, but I just think from a structural standpoint, it's difficult to do that. So I'm really pleased with that. Pool testing came back.
Yeah.
Where's the wood?
Things are good, I think there was one pool that we were concerned about, and so when you talk about a large group, that's very good news for us. Last Wednesday, probably one of the neatest days that I've had as a superintendent, to see Peter Harrison come running up to me. He said, "John, you'll never believe it. I'm going to share the story with you. There was a first grader that came off the bus, and he said, 'Dr. Harrison, I've never seen your face before.'"
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And Dr. Harrison said, "Well, what do you think?" The kid said, "Not bad." But there was excitement, there was giddiness. I think from the district perspective, I would say maybe, estimates, maybe 30% of the students-ish on the first day were kind of wearing masks. I think there was a lot of kids kind of trying it out. I think those numbers have decreased a little bit. Staff might be a little bit higher. I think the same thing. I think people are trying to find their comfort level. We're spending a lot of time just talking about being respectful of different people's different choices. There could be some things that you don't understand that are going on. It could be autoimmune issues. It could be someone coming back who's COVID positive. There just could be a lot of different things going on. So just trying to be mindful of that as we migrate back. So overall, I had some really good feedback. I had some members of the high school staff stop me and just say that the energy in the building felt different, which is just by itself just a refreshing feeling, to the point where I just happened to be here yesterday, and it's just one of those things that kind of makes you smile, is that I think Mr. Buzzell had 2 bins of athletic uniforms he found from like 1992, and put them out in the lobby, and the kids were like, it was like, opening up, and oh my gosh, look at this, you look at this one. I mean, this is the old things that we would never have been worn, they would have got thrown out. But just to see kids excited about that type of thing was really refreshing, and just to get back to that sense of what normalcy looks like. So really encouraged, we're going to continue to monitor what happens, and I think, York County's in the green. We have to understand that there's a lot of emotions around this, but we're really excited about where we're at right now. We feel like we're moving in a great direction. And as much as everything else, I'm proud of the way that we've been able to navigate through the pandemic and keep, as best we can, that civility and humanity at the center of what we're doing. When we felt like it was the right time to make a change, we made a change. When we felt like we needed to step back, we stepped back. And so trying to find that, it feels like we use the term thread the needle a lot, and I think a lot of districts are in that same place. And so we will continue to work at this. This is, it's not easy. There's questions now that are coming up, and so the questions now have kind of migrated from, what does social distancing look like? Because the SOP, there was a real shift in how it was explained. It went from a COVID mitigation tool to really now how do you manage a positive COVID case, which is a very different philosophical change than what had been before. So there's a lack of clarity, and so really trying to help the nurses get some clarity around that's tricky, and so there's some gray area now that's involved. The conversation around contact tracing is very, very vague in the SOP, and so I said, I'm gonna make the decision. It is not feasible for us to contact trace. That's not, we're not in that business. Right. The CDC can take that on. They have identified that. If that needs to change someday, then we'll have that conversation at that time, but this, I think we just need to be proactive, and so just trying to find that middle zone. But now the questions become, can we have parents come in and chaperone field trips? Can we have outside groups start to come in and use the facilities? And so there's kind of that next wave of what does the reality of this mean, and so how do we are mindful of that, and so trying to find the balancing act of we want things to be back to normal, but if we do it like that, we need to be really mindful that if you do things in stages, that allows us to pull back if we need to without having to go back to the very beginning, and that's what we're trying to do, and just be mindful as we kind of go through this. So, any questions COVID-19 related?
Feels good.
Feels good. Feels good.
Yep.
You know,
I wonder if as the weather gets nicer, that more of our students will be able to have an opportunity to eat outside.
And that was one of the
spread out
reasons, exactly,
yeah.
Lisa, that we did that. Our hope is to have the tents up around the 1st of April,
Oh, nice.
outside.
That's great.
And so we really kind of talked about, really, it's the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then really the 1st of April, you have the ability to be outside eating lunch again, you know.
Yeah.
At the high school, we still have kind of created a space that if kids aren't comfortable, there's a place that you want to be a little bit more spread out, then we can provide that as well. And just trying to be able to be mindful of that as we go. So,
Awesome. Thanks.
anything else? Okay, number 3, and so this is a little bit of a change from the budgeting standpoint and the budgeting conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. I think it's a positive thing. It does not really have a financial impact, and I'll explain that. But it's been very clear that the board has an eagerness to be able to look at reusable energy sources, to be, how do we be more mindful of how we're using our resources. And so we had a pretty in-depth conversation around LED lighting and what does that all mean. And so we had that conversation. We kind of got a quote, and the quote that I presented to you 2 weeks ago was that basically we were going to look at doing the gym at the high school, we were looking to do the outside lighting at the high school, we we're going to look at the cafeteria, and we we're going to look at kind of the foyer in the high school. And that's going to cost us around $48,000, rough numbers, I don't have it in front of me right now, but we're getting some money from Efficiency Maine to help offset the cost of that, and so that's kind of where the conversation ended. We also got a quote to do the entire high school at that same time. And that quote was for roughly $520,000, but then there was some Efficiency Maine money that kind of brought it down to like the $480,000. I'm going to give this rough numbers right now. And so we kind of left it at that. And, I had said the conversation, we just don't have the money to do that right now. That's just not a realistic thing that we could do in trying to be mindful of the budget. Ryan had a conversation, and it just happened to come up with John Simcoe, who's a representative of one of the banks that we do a lot of our work through, and who actually holds our accounts, and said, we would finance a project like that. Okay, that's interesting. And so now we looked at that $480,000 approximate plan, which would include all of the lights in the school. It would include the dimmer switches. It would include, the non-vacant sensors, to be able to control the flow of electricity. Like, for instance, right now, if you were to go to the back hallway in the athletic area, those lights are on. Right now, they're just on. That's just how they work. And so if we had those off, we would save, obviously, some money.
Sure.
And so what we found was that if we did a 10-year lease, we would save, it would cost us about $56,000, $55,000 approximately. But when we look at the energy savings, it's about $49,000. And so we would be able to do that, and it would only be at a cost of about $7,000. And so if you left it there, you might say, hey, that makes some sense for the environment. Long-term electricity prices are probably going to continue to go up over the next 10 years. And so, there would be, you could make an argument for it. What really put it over the top for myself, for Ryan, and for Tony is that you also need to factor in, the cost of an electrician to come in every time there's, a burnt-out ballast with the way we have lighting. The fact that our light bulbs don't last as long as LED light bulbs. And so all of a sudden, that $8,000 gap that we were spending becomes much smaller, and I would say we spend well over $8,000 a year in this building around just lighting issues. So now all of a sudden it becomes a cost neutral at worst, a cost savings at best situation that if we wanted to be involved with a 10-year lease. And so I kind of wanted to put it out to the board tonight to get your feelings on how you feel about that. That would require a board vote. We would work through Androscoggin Bank to be able to secure the loan. We'll look at the different rates, and we could provide that information to you. But just wanted to kind of see how the board felt as a whole about that idea of kind of looking and investing in some ways to save some money electricity-wise.
Right.
Any questions?
I think it's a good idea. 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 I think it's a good idea.
I don't see a downside.
No, and it lines up with our mission, the statement,
That's right.
and, yeah.
Now, what happens at the end of the 10-year lease?
Say it one more time.
What happens at the end of the
I know
10-year
this.
lease?
We pay an additional $1 and we own it all.
Okay,
Yes. Right? Yes.
that's really good news.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I think it sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get some more information together. You know, we will, yeah, I'm meeting tomorrow, so there's some questions that I want to make sure that I get some clarity on. The one variable that I don't know. We went into this, you know, solar project. It feels like forever ago, but 2 years
Sure.
ago, right? It kind of got sidelined, it kind of got delayed. I don't know, obviously, if we're using less electricity, we're not going to have the savings that we thought we would have because we're using less electricity. They based their projected savings on our usage. Obviously, if we use less, our savings isn't going to be the same. You know, so that, you know, but we're not spending as much either. So I think
Right.
there is a wash there, but I just want to be transparent that I don't know what that project's going to look like.
Yeah.
If you would say to me, hey, December, that's going to be up and rolling and we're going to reap the benefits of that, I would say, great. And if they were to say, hey, I hate to break it to you, it's going to be another 6 months, I would not be surprised. So I just,
Yeah.
but it is out there, and I just wanted to kind of make sure that I presented
Sure.
that.
But what we're talking about is a smaller savings on a larger bill, right?
Right,
So
Yeah.
right.
the
That's-
net is we'll be using
It's
less
still a
electricity.
That's what gets me
It's
in
just
trouble
not
with
as
shopping
big.
sometimes, you know, so, yeah, exactly right, so.
Okay.
So does that sound like we have a plan? I will
Yeah.
certainly,
Yes.
what we would do
We should
is
look
we
at
would try to lock in a rate. I would like, my hope would be at the next board meeting, that way I would have it on the agenda, that we would be able to review the lease, and then the board would have to vote on the lease itself.
Yeah, there was some discussion in our F&F meeting earlier, which we'll get to the details of which later, but locking that 3.3% rate
Yeah.
may require us to have a special board meeting between now and the next meeting, which isn't for 3 weeks.
Oh.
So we might have to get together again to have a special one-issue board meeting just to lock that rate,
Okay.
Yeah.
but
Just in case.
or maybe not.
Yeah,
We'll see.
we're
Hopefully
gonna
not.
push not to do that.
Hopefully not,
But
yeah.
if we have to, we have to. So,
Great.
okay, next, the food service RFP. And so 5 years ago, you know, Sue should probably tell the story better than I could. We looked at our food service program, and we were running at a substantial deficit, and said, look, is there a different way to do this? And so we did some research. There was a national conference in Boston. We ran into a couple of companies, did some work, and we ended up doing an RFP. We had 2 companies apply to kind of provide that service for us. We ended up going with Chartwell's. We've had Chartwell's in place for 5 years. The state of Maine limits us to doing 5 one-year contracts, and then you have to go to another RFP. And so we are in year 5 of that contract currently, so we had to go to another RFP at this point in time, which is a request for a proposal. Upon doing that, we had the same 2 companies apply again. And so when we did that, I just want to share with you kind of the composition of the committee, and then I want to share with you kind of like, here were the big things that we were looking for. And so we started in January 4th, and really, we have a committee of, you know, people who are in the central office, but Jen, Sue, Kate, Kim Clementi, who's one of our cafeteria managers at Central School, who was instrumental in our second round of interviews. Sam Fife, who's the cafeteria manager at Marshall Middle School. Lauren Cruz, who's the high school representative. We also had Ryan's daughter, a part of that group as well. And then Evie, and we also had Georgia Pendleton involved. And so it was really a nice opportunity to have some student voice. We went to student councils and said, who do you recommend? Student councils recommended people for us, and that's who we went with. And we just, again, we're trying to, for us, that was an opportunity for student voice. And so, you know, Stephanie Thompson, you know, this is what we're doing. Is there someone who you feel like has a passion about food? And she said, this is the person. This is what I want you to do. And so just important. Same thing at the high school. We have a member of the wellness committee. We wanted to have that student voice at the committee. And so really there were 6 areas that we were looking at. First of all, we have to, by Maine state expectations, is business has to be number 1. And so the financials had to be our top priority. But we also wanted to talk about nutrition. We wanted to talk about student and family participation and communication. We wanted to talk about partnering with recycling. we wanted to talk about how do we incorporate student voice, and then kind of as that third kind of category was that catering special events, you know, kind of that creative out-of-the-box thinking. And so we met with both groups. It was the 28th of January. You know, after we met with them, I think we really came to the realization of we were able to really micro-focus on what we wanted. And so we put together a list of 20 things that were really important to the committee. That could range from having a higher quality milk. Is there a higher quality yogurt that we can serve? You know, what is the cost analysis of those types of things? How do we drive participation? You know, those really types of specific questions. And we gave that to both companies, and both companies came in and presented to us. After the presentation, you know, we then had a rubric that we determined. We had everybody fill out that rubric, and then we ultimately calculated the rubrics, and we found out that we had a company that we would recommend. And so, interestingly enough, I would say, and I know Ryan would agree, that when you look at the feedback that we received from the committee, all of our feedback was very similar, and the area where the companies really separated themselves was the financials. And so I think what we really was clear to us is that, you know, it's the manager that's really the important component in getting that most that we can out of the manager. And so after we met, Chartwell's was the company that was our choice. And so we would bring that to you today for, you know, to make a recommendation on that. We have an action vote on the new business. And just so we're clear, that would then say that we would then go to Chartwell's and negotiate an agreement with Chartwell. So that doesn't mean the negotiation's over with, then we would start to be able to kind of dive into more of the financial pieces. So that was our process. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks.
I will say it was an
That's great.
intense process.
Yeah,
I want to be 100% clear.
Yeah.
I think having, one of the things that I would like to put on a future agenda is that I would really like to start a food service committee. That we could have representatives from the board, representatives from possibly some families, some students, and, you know, 2, 3, 4 times a year, let's get together and talk about how things are going. Have the manager of the department there to be able to have those ongoing communication pieces, and just really making sure who owns the locus of control and what decisions are the food company's decisions to make and what are our decisions to make. So really an important part of that. So I think that's one of the things that the recommendation, and I think that we had consensus around
Yes.
that was something we'd like to do.
Yeah,
Sure.
great.
One of the things that was really, you know, a concern was also there's a business model, right, which is the financial. This is the balancing act, right? And then there's the we're in a school and we want all kids to be able to have the best that we can give them. And so, like, what does that mean? Well, if I'm in third lunch at Marshwood High School and everybody else in first lunch and second lunch has 7 options, and I go to third lunch and I only have pizza left as an option, that doesn't seem right.
No.
You know. Now, an argument can be made to say, well, that's how we control our costs because we don't overproduce in our production records and everything else. But at the same time, we were very clear that we want, you know, the first student in the cafeteria to have the choices, and then the last student in the cafeteria had those choices. And so, like, I think it's just more philosophical around, like, the financials are very important, don't misunderstand me, but it's also important, you know, that you know, it's important to educate kids around food and give kids proper food choices and be able to educate them around that. Part of the difficulty of the timing of this was that we were doing this in the middle of the pandemic. And so things looked really different, and so it just didn't feel great, you know, in general. And so I think we were able to kind of navigate through that, so.
Yep. And I think the timing with the new food service manager, she's coming in new at the same time that we're all sort of putting new eyes on this, that I think will be a good thing.
Yeah, good.
in the long run.
That's awesome.
Did I miss anything?
Good.
Sue, Kate, or Jen?
No, it was great,
No,
it
I
was
think
thorough,
that's
and I
great.
was happy to be proud of it.
Thank you to the committee involved, all of those people that you named and the school board members, and that was a lot of work and a lot of time.
Yeah,
and
and it's
energy.
very eye-opening, you know, you go in thinking, we want this, and there's a lot of government, like
Yeah.
federal guidelines that tie your hands in ways that,
You don't
you
know
don't know.
necessarily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's definitely a long range.
And I will say, and I will not hide this, that we had some moments where we just said, wait a second. where are some guarantees for us? That there are these incredible resources, but we want them in our buildings on a regular
Right.
basis, and we want you checking in with us on a regular basis. There was these incredible chefs for both companies, but that needs to be part of our students' experience all the time. And obviously, the pandemic is part of this, but really making sure that this is the expectation going forward, and being able to be really clear that there's some protections for us where the pressure isn't on, us to be able to say, you must do this. It's that if you don't do this, this is your consequence.
Right.
And I don't mean to be punitive, but the dynamic has to be spun. They're the food service professionals. They need to be providing a high-quality service for us. We shouldn't have to monitor whether that's happening or not.
That's right.
And I will, but I just think it's finding that
Yep.
middle ground, so.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, we had our two Alice meetings last week, and so I think there was really two major questions that people had that kind of came up over and over again. And so I think what people did, as I would do, and is what I did, is they would go online and find out what's Alice like, and they get these stories from different perspectives. And so to be totally transparent, when we went into this conversation back, in September of 2019, when I was first superintendent, we needed to make some changes because we weren't necessarily meeting some of the guidelines for the safe environment.
Right.
I was really uncomfortable with part of what Alice talked about, and so when that conversation came up, the counter piece was really difficult for people to get their heads around, and I just was very clear that I don't feel it's right. I don't want to be teaching, kindergartners that you need to throw Nerf balls at someone who enters a classroom. And if you go online, those are the types of videos that you see from Alice. And I was very clear about that. I went to the meeting with an open mind, and that was one of the first things they said. They said that they understand philosophically that some schools do not do this, and they support the program either way. So that was something that I think is really important. So we're not going to have, that's something that we're going to teach our students. The other thing, and it happened to me, and so I got an email, I think you might have all been on it, but the questions that was asked me by the community member were the exact same questions that I had. And so my experience with Alice was, and this is the trainer model, this is not training staff or training students, but I went into a situation where there was the Nerf guns and coming in, and here's the intruder, and what do you do? And that is just the stress, and sure. It is not something that I would ever want to have taught to students in that way. For students, it's about following teachers' directions, making good decisions. Do we have evacuation plans? And I kind of go back to the example that I would use is that we have to be able to work with staff to say, this is the situation, what is the safest thing we can do for kids? And I'm going to go back to the fire. They had at Marshall High School, I think it's probably 6 years ago now, roughly, but we had kids walking through the fire zone, because that was what the evacuation plan that we had practiced over and over again did.
Right.
And that's how everybody did it. Here's your primary and here's your secondary route.
Right.
And Alice is really about thinking about that. So we are not going to have people, we're not going to say to kids, okay, we're going to do an Alice drill today, and then we're going to have, Mr. Cavalier running around with a Nerf gun, shooting people with Nerf guns. That's not going to happen. I wouldn't teach my staff that way. I wouldn't teach the students that way. We need to do it in a very mindful way and be respectful of where we're at. So our teachers are very sensitive to that. This is a, for some of my principals, this is a very highly stressful thing to talk about, because the reality is it's something we have to do and we're doing on a regular basis, but this is a change, and it's something that people don't like to talk about, but we have to make sure that we're creating the safest environment possible. So there is no teaching of the counter. That is not happening. And we are not going to go in with fake firearms, fake guns, those types of things to teach staff or students to do that. That's just not something that we're going to do. So, but those are, I think, great questions, and those are the same exact questions that I had as I kind of went through it. The other part, as I said a minute ago, it's really important, is that it's not a question of if we have to do this. This is a requirement that we have to do, and unfortunately, it makes me sick that we live in the world where we have to do this with kids, but it's something that we do have to do. So it's not a question of if, it's of what. And so this seemed to make the most logical sense. Sure.
For the parents and community members who may have missed those opportunities to learn more, was it recorded? Is there
I don't believe so.
Yeah,
No,
because that would be sensitive, right? So,
Yeah.
okay.
But I would definitely ask them to reach out to the different buildings, because there are some videos that they can share to learn about it.
Okay.
It's a little bit harder because you don't have it necessarily in context.
Right. Right.
Particularly, I think if people were just to watch the video, they're gonna go right to the counter, like, ooh, that doesn't feel right.
Right,
And so,
right.
and that's the same exact reaction I had, but,
Right, but out of context, it
Yep.
would be really, yeah.
yep,
Were the meetings particularly well attended?
I would say no.
No? Yeah, okay.
I shouldn't say I would say, I will say no.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
they probably, I think the meeting that I came to here at the high school, I think there was 6 people that were in attendance.
Oh, wow.
At the middle school, I think there was 5,
Okay.
And this is not, it's being rolled out for next
That's correct.
school year.
Correct.
So at some point, there will be some type of presentation for students
Yes.
when families again, or?
I think probably what I would recommend is that be part of maybe the talk at an open house. To say this is,
That's a
this
good
is some of the things
idea.
that we're talking about when you have people on site, to
when
be able to
most
talk about it.
people are
I think
coming
what
through.
staff are doing right now is they're trying to work through, get their comfort around
Yeah.
this, because this is a change for them,
Oh, yeah.
In the past, it was shut the door, pull the blind down, lock it, get in the corner, and that's kind of what you were taught to do, and so this
Right.
is a little bit of a shift, and
Yep.
so, I know that the Great Works School, they were practicing it this week. I believe the high school tomorrow has a group getting together to talking about some of this, so there is some ongoing professional development.
Yeah.
It is a shift, I do think it's important to note that, we had staff. I tried to get to every single building. I was in every single building. I tried to talk to every single staff member. But there were people, and I was clear that, like, this was the last thing that I wanted to talk about with people. Like, this is, like, in the middle of a pandemic, I didn't say, you know what, let's talk about Alice just for fun. Like, that was not
Yeah.
something that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm sick to my stomach because this is another stressor in a very hectic world. But I would say that the staff overwhelmingly was thankful that we started that conversation. And it opened up, what do our security plans look like? And so those are some things that we're gonna continue to work on. We're looking into possibly mapping out the buildings. I mentioned that to you before, looking at having those types of things done, which would be really helpful kind of going forward. And then also trying to include the police departments in those different conversations as well.
Yeah, it would be helpful if there was like a recorded, maybe presentation where one of the staff is just talking over the slides with the key points. And then that way that can be sent out to the parents when the time is right, or repurposed when someone asks a question if they didn't get to attend
Yep.
a workshop. But just like a short, 5-minute overview, I think would be helpful just to keep folks
Absolutely.
informed if they're curious.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Other questions would be, that came up that I thought were very good questions were around, do you notify when you're going to do these things? And so I think it's, we notify depending on the grade level, right? I think it's all about trying to teach the skills and then apply the skills. And so there's a progression that we would need to go through. So you might, with, kindergartners, you might talk about it every time and just in frame around, like, that we're going to, like, basically play Simon Says, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to do today. Whereas at the high school, it might be a little bit different. They may kind of go through the skills a couple of times and then say, look, sometime this week we're going to practice this. Don't want you to be scared. It's not to scare anybody, but like we just want to be prepared. And I think those are the types of things that we'll have those conversations.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
any other questions?
Thank you.
You are welcome. And so the last thing, which is kind of a good thing, I think, is it kind of goes along with our COVID conversation, is that social distancing is not necessarily a requirement any longer. And so would we like to continue to meet in this arena, knowing that we're going to be back in here the first week of May because we have a district budget meeting at that time? We can migrate back to the Learning Center. We could do that at our next meeting. I just kind of put it out to the board to kind of get your sense of what you'd like to do.
As much as I love having these bright lights shining in my eyes, I think it would be kind of nice to get back to the Learning Center.
I
Anybody disagree?
I totally agree.
Agree.
Okay.
Plan on that for our next meeting, which is?
Planning that for our next meeting. The
3
only,
weeks.
the only caveat that I would throw out, and I want to look into this, and I want to meet with the custodial staff, is that they are still using that room kind of spaced out. And so what does that look like?
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, how much work
Yeah,
is
like
that?
for just the
Good
amount of
point.
effort that it takes to set up, which space is going to take less effort and time
Yeah.
for the staff,
Yeah.
I think
That's
is
fair.
most appropriate.
And the play.
Agree.
And the
Yeah.
play and how that ties in.
Musical.
Yeah.
Because this is
I
obviously
think all of us would be fine to
set
do
up
with
as well,
whatever's
plus it's way more
easiest
costly
for
to be
Okay.
in-house.
everyone else.
You mean that's not always there?
It is.
It's really
So,
cool.
Is
Get up
it
on my tap sheet.
fair then, if I take away from the board right now, is that all things being equal, John, we would rather be in the learning center, but we
Yes.
want to do it so it creates the least amount of havoc for everybody that's in the building at this
Exactly.
point in time and
Yes.
impacts
Yep.
people.
Yes,
Are you okay with that? And
Yes.
let me do some research over the next week and a half or so, and I'll get back to you to let you know what the decision is. That okay?
Sounds
Yes.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Trevor could not be here this evening. He emailed us. Annabelle?
Hey,
You're
guys.
recording.
Annabelle.
I have kind of a long list of stuff tonight to go over because a lot has happened and a lot is coming up. I'll start with sports. Not too much has been going on, but softball and baseball have had preseason meetings. I don't exactly know when they're starting to practice all together. I do know softball has been having captains practice. Outdoor track will soon have a preseason meeting, and I've seen a lot of track runners running by my house recently as well. Tennis has begun practicing, and boys volleyball has been playing games with other teams in the state, like Falmouth, Cheverus, and Yarmouth. As I've heard, they're all having a blast, and it is very fun to attend the games. And then Mr. Gratian let me know tonight that Winter Guard has their season finals at Sanford on the 27th. In the other realm, SATs are next Wednesday. Course selection will begin next week. Prom set date is May 7th at the Sheridan. You can purchase tickets online for Little Shop of Horrors starting this week. Party Planet, the one act, is showing on Friday, and it's $5 at the door. Gym and calf lunches have been combined. There's a salad bar, a sandwich station, and daily special station, and they're all available again. It has been a blast for kids to return. It's been just a burst of normalcy, and it's a lot of fun. Today during Hawk Block, students were given the chance to see a scene from the one act. Very entertaining, lots of cheering, especially for Mr. Livingston. He's doing a great job with that. Next week's Hawk Block will be an academic intervention since the juniors are taking the SATs. Student Gov is working on the return of SAC passes and the introduction of composting to the cafeteria. They recently worked hard on reopening the senior lounge, which a lot of seniors have been taking advantage of. The GSA will have Mr. Creech at their meeting tomorrow in order to show him the nature of our meetings and what we've been doing. Civil Rights has worked on Women's History Month decor, and you can see it on the walls upstairs, as well as their board in the middle of the bathrooms. Trevor and I are going to soon be looking for his replacement for next year, to look for applicants for that. And this week, Interact Club has been selling pins, and Anna Flynn has been making homemade stickers as well to sell to support Ukraine. And Mr. Gratian also let me know that the first unmasked concert since COVID was last week, and it was grades 6 through 12. That is all.
Awesome. Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. It was content-rich tonight.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Correspondence, we have none to report on. That brings us to the reports of the committees. First up is Finance and Facilities, which met at 5 o'clock this evening. I'll give a quick rundown on the numbers. Effective in February, our budget, revenue, and expenditure lines are all within about $500 of each other. I've never seen that before. That was pretty cool. But things look good. Federal grants are still coming in slowly. Adult education is still ahead, but now appears to be on that glide slope that gets us to net neutral by the end of the year. School nutrition continues to be profitable. Our balance, general fund financial statement, we're pretty much right where we need to be with about a third of the school year, or excuse me, of the fiscal year to go. Cash flow looks good. That's pretty much it. Lisa, you were going to give us the update on...
Yes, so Mr. Coverly gave us a really good update, a thorough update on the LED lighting project here at the middle school and the opportunity we have to break even, if not save a little bit of money by going with a 10-year lease and just doing everything, indoor, outdoor, sensors, all the things, and with a lease and agreement with Androscoggin Bank. So that's great. In terms of fuel, as we all know, the pricing right now is astronomically high. And so a decision's been made that it's probably not in our best interest to lock anything in right now. And Ryan shared that the recommendation might be that to talk to the towns about adding a question to the ballot about being able to use funds from our capital reserve if needed, if that comes about as a need in the future. So just so we have that as backup. But hopefully that fuel pricing will hopefully come down a little bit to reflect the cost per barrel that is already publicly out there as being less. So we'll see about that. There was also conversation about some research that had been done around electric buses, and our very knowledgeable mechanic shared that he just didn't feel like the technology is quite there yet, so it might be premature to be focusing too terribly much on that, and the investment, of course, is significant as well. But due to some efficiency issues with heating the buses and all those types of things, it's going to be good to just hold off on that. We had some good news in terms of our insurance company, hopefully coming through with all of the funds that will cover the mold damage and getting that removed, which was pretty significant. They will not be covering anything preventative, as is in our insurance agreement, but to have that covered at least is great news. That's really all I have. You covered food service update as well. Did I miss anything?
No, I just think that, we're looking into getting Oakhurst milk option
Yes.
for our students, as it's a better choice and a local choice. So we might be making the transition to purchase our own coolers for the various schools and make that investment, but negotiation with Oakhurst is still on the table. That's it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Next up, the Education Policy Committee, which has not met since our last board meeting, but we have a bunch of second reads tonight. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get to those under new business. Wellness SEL has again not met since our last meeting and is due to meet again on April 6th.
Yes.
Yep.
Good, okay. Not on the agenda, but I did want to mention that we have now formally shut down that advisory committee that was working on the board portion of the website. We had our last meeting, subsequent to our last board meeting, made our sort of final suggestions for that. And that's now in really excellent shape. We'll continue, as John, you pointed out earlier, to look at ways to make our policies more searchable on the website. But that'll be an ongoing activity. I did want to mention too, I attended I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the agenda, but the Region 9 school board's sort of informal meeting, I attended that, and we talked at length about new board members, what's it like, what does it mean to be on a board, and I pointed out to them that we've just done this exercise of revamping our website, the school board portion of it, specifically to address this question, what does the school board actually do and what does it not do? That link has now been sent out to all of the Region 9 school boards to have a look at that.
Okay, no
So
pressure.
good work, all.
We're on the line.
Anyway, okay, that's the report of the committees. That brings us to new business. May I have a motion, please, around the second reading of ABCE?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy EBCE, school closings and cancellations.
A second.
Thank you, Sue. Any comments or questions?
No, this was pretty straightforward.
Okay. All in favor? It's 6-0, very good, thank you. We have a motion around EEA.
Move to approve the second reading and discussion for policy EEA transportation.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kate. Comments or questions?
Again, pretty,
No changes since the first
Nope.
read?
no,
All in favor? That's 6-0, thank you. A motion, please, with regard to JLCB.
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCB, immunization of students.
Second, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Comments or questions?
I can't help myself, I just have to say this
Go
has
ahead.
nothing to do with COVID. So I just want to be very clear.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is about
Yeah.
childhood immunizations. This is not about COVID-19 or COVID-19 vaccines.
Right.
Great.
Sorry. I think it's been drilled into my brain, so.
That's-
Yeah.
That's good,
Yeah,
that's good.
gotcha.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you. May I have a motion, please, with regard to JLCB-R?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCB-R, main school immunization requirements.
I'll second. Lisa?
Thank you, Lisa. Again, no change, this is very straightforward, I think.
Yeah. The way it's set up is much more clear. I
Yep,
like
it's
it.
great.
All in favor? 6-0, thank you. May I have a motion, please, with regard to JLCB-E1?
I'll move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCB-E1, request for med exemption from mandatory immunization.
Second, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you very much. May I have a motion, please, with regard to the second reading of JLCB-E2?
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCB-E2, immunization signature form for enrollment.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jen. This is just the signature form. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you. And a motion with regard to -E3.
I'll move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCB-E3, MS-8035 vaccination catch-up plan.
A second.
That was you, Sue?
Yep.
Yep, thank you. This is the catch-up plan, right?
Mhm.
Questions, comments?
No, I think it's very clear. I
Yep.
like it.
All in favor? 6-0, thank you. And finally, on that front, E4.
I move to approve a second reading and discussion of policy JCLB-E4, immunization exemption form IEP.
Second, Heather.
Heather, thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is again 6-0. Now, a motion, please, with regard to JFAA.
I'll move to approve the second reading, discussion of policy JFAA-E1, admission of resident students, procedure for students enrolling in school for the first time.
Second, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Comments or questions? No changes from last time, of course. All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you very much. Motion with regard to JFAA-E2.
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy JFAA-E2, admission of resident students, procedure for transfer and homeschool students.
I'll second.
Sue, thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you. All right, may I have a motion, please, with regard to our selected vendor for food service?
I'll move to approve the negotiation of a contract with a selected vendor to manage the district's food service program.
I'll second. Lisa?
Thank you.
And just for clarity,
Please, go ahead.
that was Chartwell's, was
Yes.
was our
Yes.
selected vendor as we went through the process, and we had the scoring rubric that I discussed earlier.
Yes.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? 6-0, thank you. And then last along the new business, this is a motion to allow use of our bus services.
I move to approve the request for bid and to provide use of the MSAD 35 bus transportation services for the town of Elliott Community Service Department summer programs, Elliott Kids Play, and the Youth Bound Camp from June 28th to August 18th, 2022. Great.
Second.
Sue, thank you.
So just for clarity,
Yes.
this is a revenue source. This is kind of above and beyond kind of the scope of our transportation department. Every year prior to the pandemic, there would be a few groups that would reach out to us to say, would you be interested in bidding on our trips for the summertime? And so we are given those trips. We create a pricing structure that, obviously works for everybody. And then we bid on that. Sometimes we see the bids, other times we don't, but this is kind of the first step. So this is really a sign of things going back to somewhat normalcy, to be able to have those opportunities.
It is good to see this back.
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
It's
Very good.
It's a flashback in time.
Very
yeah.
exciting.
Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0.
Do you know what's weird is that is the first time I've ever had this on an agenda where I was the superintendent of schools.
Wow.
Oh, my
Really?
goodness.
Because of the pandemic,
Because of the
when it
pandemic.
hit, yeah.
Because,
Wow.
it would have been in the springtime before I
that's
started.
Right?
That's
So
right.
we didn't have it for the last,
Crazy.
so this is kind of, it
Wow.
just gives you a scope of how long it's been since
Wow.
we've seen
Exciting.
those
That's
things. so,
crazy.
Wow,
no.
yeah,
Very good.
okay.
That concludes our new business. The final item on our agenda is building administrator check-in. I think we're limited tonight just to the high school.
That's correct.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for a chance to share. Annabelle did such a thorough job, so I will be just reinforcing a couple things and maybe adding a little texture to some of them. It's been a really great couple of weeks. So from the teaching and learning department, just to reinforce, it's that time of year, course registration has begun. Relative to the 8th grade, one thing that I just want to emphasize is we're doing on-site visits. Our counselors are getting FaceTime with our 8th grade students again, and our department leaders are getting FaceTime with the 8th grade teachers. So there's a little bit more coherence in that process. So it's really exciting, and the message we send there is, here's your chance to start building that next phase of your journey. And our teachers at both schools have been doing a wonderful job, and the counselors as well. And at the high school, from March 10th to about the 22nd, they'll start those conversations with the students and making recommendations, and teachers will be making some recommendations. From kind of the climate and culture category, our themes this year, as I hope you've heard, have been about community, individual expression, having healthy dialogue and building empathy. So I would just highlight an initiative that began a few months ago. It was about 5 or 6 students talking about an area that was suffering, the bathrooms, with some behavior and some of that early year. So we have right now a poster in front of every bathroom promoting, appropriate action, and also there's a QR code that you can activate and say the bathroom has maybe a soap dispenser where it shouldn't be, or is in need of towels. So it's as much practical as it is symbolic, and I thought it was great. It was a student-led initiative under a healthy community, and they identified that as a space, and so it's been really, really good. And you'll hear during the course of the day, that QR code goes to the main office, and Pete, could you help out here, or could you, and I think it just brings a healthy message to the community. Our civil rights team, some of the work has been mentioned. One thing I thought a really interesting project is they created a calendar in Google that indicates all the different days of celebration and the diverse cultures, and you can add it to your calendar as an overlay. So it's a little bit for building some, capacity there and some understanding. And I thought that was a great project, and that was sent out this week. And in the spirit of a lot of work that we've been doing in advisory and Hawk Block with individual expression, but being part of the community, we're now starting to develop some partnerships, and there's a youth identity summit that you may or may not be familiar with. There's a few nonprofit groups that have been promoting some of this work, maybe inspired a little bit by the most recent presidential elective and promoting healthy conversations. And Wayne Fleet has kind of taken the lead, and they have a youth identity summit. It's a Saturday in April, so we're going to promote that among our students and see what the interest is there. And it's one of those authentic experiences where we're doing it in the building, but we want to, give our students an opportunity to go outside and connect. And I really, to be honest with you, I think we're going to explore further a partnership with the folks up at Wayne Fleet who've taken the lead on this. And there's a couple other groups, one of them the Maine Policy Institute, Narrative 4, Third Thought Initiative for Civic Engagement. There's a lot of areas that we can use to partner and then offer some opportunities. So I just want to mention that the work we've been doing in advisory, we're giving students a chance to explore that a little bit further. The goal basically of that summit is, building bridges and, creating a vision for strong, multicultural communities. The Can We project is basically the touch point, and you may, as I said, you may or may not have heard. Once we get deeper into it, we'll probably look to share with the board more, more information on that. And the big news, last week, mask optional. Students, we think, handled it great to prepare for it. We had communication to students, to parents. We had advisory conversations. We also had class meetings. On the 9th, every class came in and we played a video. I don't know the analogy, maybe after a long season, it was a highlight video. So after the 2 years, look what we've all gone through. And it was just really beautifully done by the Hawk Block Advisory Committee, and the message there was, look what you've done under great duress and great pressure. Imagine what we can do going forward as a community once we have these restrictions and restraints off. But it was also a moment in time where we wanted to pause in the moment and talk about what it meant. Both a sense of relief, but also still some anxiety for folks and some expectations going forward. Mr. Caverly's anecdote about the student coming off the bus, I had a similar moment with the 9th grade class when we talked about what does this moment mean. And I had my mask on and I said it might look like this or it might look like this. And when I took my mask down, the 9th grade's reaction was, that was funny. That's a true story. And I said, that's actually the good half of my face. So they were great. The students were great, and we've seen a seamless transition. And then consequently, we were able to shift the lunch back, and it's really been a nice feeling in the building. And another residual, real quickly, is a recycling program. We'll be able to start that composting portion. It was harder to imagine in 2 separate spaces, but we've been meeting pretty regularly with the student government and the green team. They'll start end of this week, beginning of next week, informational campaign, and then we'll have some bright orange bins at Food Waste Only, and BioGreen 360 will have our receptacles outside, so we're looking forward to that. Wednesday night, last Wednesday, was music in our schools, and the Hawk Block students viewed the one-act play today, which was great. Little Shop of Horrors begins the 1st, and the only addition there is we're going to resurrect Hawk Buddies a little bit. We've been talking with Central School, and we'll start getting that off the ground as well. So a little bit of a deep breath, and I feel like there's a little bit of a skip in the step of both adults and students. So,
Mr. Scully, could you share just a little bit about around the academic piece that you shared with us in the budget workshop earlier?
for next year?
Yeah, just kind of like just a quick little overview
I
of
think-
kind of where we are and what you're thinking of for next year in
Yeah,
terms
I
of
think
focusing.
what we're imagining, and we're trying to collect as much data as possible and keep our reviews up there, but what we're getting a lot is your schedule is going to be important as a way to recover or respond to maybe literally going back to normal next year or our new normal. So what we want to do is focus on, as I said, you know, for lack of a better term, recovery sense, and collect some data and look to see where that learning regressions might be, and look to see what students need to make sure they're up to speed and can move forward and close that gap. So we're focused a lot on the, you know, idea of intervention, but using the, you know, it might sound like jargon, but it's true, the real-time or just-in-time intervention. So if students start struggling on Monday, we want to have some place for them to go on Tuesday. So we'll have an interventionist. We're working with our courseware platform that actually has intervention element to it. We could have open source, but you can imagine a student coming down, popping open their computer, showing what they're struggling with, and the interventionist be able to support them by directing them somewhere. We also want to try to staff that additionally with teachers as their study spot. They wouldn't be somewhere else in a study. They'd be there and have, you know, essentially almost like a writing center feel, a math center feel. And then, as I said, really, really focus on making sure students, we're getting them back up to speed simultaneously as they're trying to move forward. That's an interesting dynamic we haven't been in before, but we really feel like that has to be a priority. That, and again, for lack of a better term, intervention, but very real time and just in time. And based on that conversation we had downstairs, you know, thought to also have the fitness common as well. So we could have a learning common, even a fitness common where students could go. So there's been a lot of exciting, we've allowed ourselves to have more forward-thinking conversations, but I hope that gives some context.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
great.
thank you so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just had one comment. I did hear about the Youth Summit opportunity, and I was just wondering if there was a lot of interest generated within the school that perhaps we could consider providing district transportation and lunch or whatever, if there was a lot of.
Yep, we just talked about that today, and I
Oh,
feel like
good.
maybe the civil rights group, someone will adopt that and collate, but yeah, so we're just excited that these opportunities are happening, and so we're rolling them out, and if there's some interest, we'll absolutely look into providing a common transportation. It's brand new and it's exciting, and I do think that we'll probably end up partnering. We did meet with a representative from the Can We project, which basically would come down and they'd give an on-site retreat day about, you know, having open and honest dialogue, and it's really, I think, timely. So,
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, but you're providing that extra opportunity with transportation might allow for other kids that may not be able to get a ride
Yep.
up north to attend something like that. It might just diversify the pool of attendees. So
Yeah.
I just thought I'd throw that out there. Cool.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Rob.
Sullivan.
Thank you.
Any last comments or questions from the board?
I just wanted to thank, I think Mr. Caverly said that it was Annabelle who initiated our pronouns on our plates, and student voice was heard, and we have them today, so thank you.
They look great.
They do.
love 'em.
Yep, thanks.
I also had a comment that I forgot to mention. The National Honor Society induction finally got a date, and it is April 28th, a Thursday. Woo!
Great.
That's awesome.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
I know that there was some discussion, the superintendent review.
Yes.
Are we gonna do a committee around that, or how is that? I know
Right.
we started a Google Doc, and
We
I
did.
just- I guess I'm kind of lost of what we're supposed to do now.
Yeah, it's been idle for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I think we'll continue to work on the Google Doc.
Okay.
This is a proposal for making more robust the process by which the board conducts the performance review of superintendent. The next one is due in December, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it's
Did I have that
usually,
right?
Mm,
or were we off like a 6-month?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
like
weird, I'll get clarity.
Okay.
It's a
That would
weird
be
thing, the way that it
helpful.
would,
I remember it was kind of a weird cycle.
yeah, it is an awkward cycle. You have to, I think by law, you have to do a review 6 months
It has to do with the budget
Has,
cycle.
that budget cycle and contract status. Let me get this,
Okay.
I can answer that question.
Then we'll have a date to work backwards from, I
Yes.
guess.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Great.
May I have the motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second, Heather.
All in favor? That is 6-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.